My name is Audrey Donovan. I'm 41 years old. And this is the story of how my husband thought he could betray me in the open, and how I exposed everything, not with rage, but with power. The message came in at 3:20 p.m. sharp. A hotel reservation confirmation. I wasn't supposed to see it, it was sent through our company's internal email system by mistake. But there it was. Subject, reservation confirmed. Coastal Pearl Resort. Ocean View Suite. Premium wine package. My first instinct was confusion. Then came the steady, suffocating burn of realization. It wasn't the name of the resort that hurt, it was the sender. Kelsey Monroe. My husband Eric's executive assistant. The woman I had noticed too many times on too many receipts. Lunches labeled client meetings. Late-night travel logs. Smiles that lasted 1 second too long. And now this, a weekend getaway to the most luxurious resort on the West Coast. I wasn't on the itinerary. I wasn't even in the conversation. I stared at the email like it might vanish if I blinked. But it didn't. It sat there, smug and permanent. For 14 years, Eric and I had built Donovan Technologies together from nothing, from our garage and handwritten notebooks. I managed the structure, operations, and legal growth. Eric played the charismatic visionary, the public face. Together, we were the dream duo of Silicon Valley. Or so I thought. But over the last year, things had shifted. He started hiding his phone. Changing his passcodes. Working later. Coming home with that strange detachment you can't fake if you still care. And Kelsey Monroe, always on his schedule, always assisting, always one step too close. That day, when I walked into the boardroom, they were already seated. Eric looked casual, confident, even. Loosened tie, hair perfectly styled. Kelsey was beside him, tapping on her tablet. She didn't even flinch when I entered. She just looked up, with that look. The one women give other women when they think they've won. I smiled back. Cool. Calm. Controlled. The meeting continued like clockwork. I spoke about our Palo Alto project, growth projections, security updates. But my mind was spinning, rewinding, calculating. That night at dinner, Eric poured my wine like everything was normal. Told me he was heading to Portland for a client meeting with Reynolds Group. I nodded. Played the game. I knew Reynolds wasn't even active this quarter. But I said nothing. Not yet. Because this time, I wasn't going to cry into a pillow or confront him in the kitchen like I had before. I wasn't going to scream or beg or accuse. This time, I was going to bury him in the boardroom he thought he controlled. The next morning, I stood at the window of our bedroom as Eric loaded golf clubs into his trunk. Golf. For a meeting with a non-existent client. I didn't say goodbye. I went straight to my office. The morning sun streamed through the glass, casting a quiet reflection of someone I barely recognized, a woman simmering just below the surface. Not broken. Not defeated. Not anymore. I opened my inbox and typed a short message to Rachel, our HR director. One of the few people I still trusted. Please send me Kelsey Monroe's complete personnel file. Urgent. Rachel didn't ask why. 30 minutes later, the file landed in my inbox. I opened it, expecting confirmation of what I already knew: office romance, perhaps a few HR violations. What I didn't expect was her emergency contact. Name, Ryan Maddox. Occupation, Senior Data Analyst. Relationship, fiancé. I froze. Ryan? Ryan, the quiet genius who built our entire internal security framework. The one who never missed a deadline, never raised his voice. The one who still worked late nights in the coding wing. That Ryan? She was engaged to him? While sneaking away with Eric? My hands trembled. Not from pain. From precision. Something had just clicked. And my strategy had just changed. That night, I walked quietly into the 5th-floor coding room. Ryan was still there, hunched over 3 screens. When he saw me, he looked surprised, even nervous. "Miss Donovan," he asked, standing up. "Ryan. I need your help with a special project." His eyes lit up. "For this weekend." He hesitated. "Kelsey and I have a trip planned." I smiled faintly. "This project could elevate your career and protect everything you've built here." He paused. Looked at the photo on his desk, him and Kelsey under fall leaves. "I'm listening," he said. I didn't tell him the full truth. Not yet. But I had planted the seed. By the time I returned to my office, I was no longer planning revenge. I was engineering justice. And it would begin, not with a confrontation, but with a board meeting. At the exact same resort where my husband was planning his affair. 1 floor below their suite. The name of the resort was Seaside Ember, a place reserved for Fortune 500 executives and people who didn't blink at $1,000 bottles of wine. Fitting, I thought. Eric always liked to play the part of the success story. Even when he was faking the script. I scheduled the meeting for that Saturday. Subject line: Security Audit and Internal Power Restructuring Review. I marked it urgent and confidential, sent it to 6 board members, our legal counsel, and finance director. Each of them had expressed quiet concerns over Eric's recent behavior. I just gave them a reason to act. Once the confirmations started rolling in, I took things further. I called our tech support manager to arrange a private, fully secured boardroom on the 2nd floor of the resort. The screen would be large. The access, limited. Every file and piece of evidence? Encrypted and preloaded. Then I called legal. I wanted every transaction Eric had made in the last 2 years marked client development or strategic engagement. Especially those connected to Kelsey. Flights. Meals. Hotel stays. I didn't stop there. I logged into our internal surveillance system. Months of hallway footage. Elevator glances. The brush of a hand. The whispered laughs. Moments they didn't think anyone would piece together. But I did. I clipped it all. Labeled every timestamp. Quiet betrayal preserved in high definition. I moved quickly, precisely. By Thursday, everything was in motion. The final confirmation came from Ryan. "I've cleared my schedule," he emailed. "Where do I need to be?" I sent him his own reservation, 1 floor above mine. "We meet Saturday morning. Bring your credentials and your backbone." That evening, I opened my closet. The burgundy sheath dress caught my eye. It was strong, structured. Vintage cut. I hadn't worn it in years, not because I couldn't, but because somewhere along the way, I had started thinking power didn't belong to me anymore. But it did. I packed it. Friday morning, I arrived at Seaside Ember. Early. Alone. My corner suite overlooked the circular driveway of the resort entrance. I set up my DSLR with a long-range lens, just behind the curtain. At 2:45 p.m., their car pulled up. Kelsey exited first, hair curled, floral dress swaying as she laughed too loudly. Eric followed. He wore the same confident smirk he always used at investor dinners. His hands slid over her waist like they were on their honeymoon. I took the photo. Then another. Then 20 more. Each click of the shutter wasn't just proof, it was a nail in the coffin of his credibility. That night, I sat at the bar in the lobby, hidden behind a decorative pillar, watching table 4. Eric's favorite. He ordered tuna and red wine, Oregon Pinot. My old favorite. I had the waiter email me the receipt for reimbursement verification. The audacity didn't even shock me anymore. It only confirmed what I already knew. he thought I'd never see. But I saw it all. And Saturday, so would everyone else. By 9 a.m. the next morning, I was dressed and waiting. Burgundy dress. Heels sharp as my plan. Hair tied in a clean twist. I looked powerful. Because I was. At 9:30, Ryan knocked on my door. He looked tired. Pale. Hollow in the way men look when the world they believed in collapses overnight. I handed him the folder. Photos. Transaction logs. One page at a time, I watched the realization crush him. She said it was just a networking weekend, he said, barely a whisper. We set a wedding date, you know? September. My mother already sent out save the dates. I didn't touch him. I didn't offer comfort. Instead, I laid out the bigger truth. Eric's trying to restructure the company behind the board's back. He's shifting shares. Reducing my veto power. There's a draft naming Kelsey as an incoming executive partner. Ryan's face turned blank. You need access to his encrypted files, he asked after a long silence. Yes. You built the system. You know the legal boundaries. He nodded once. Then we start tonight. That evening, we worked side by side from my room. By midnight, we had everything. Drafts. Emails. Contracts unsigned but very real. Legal maneuvering. Misappropriation of funds. Pre-authorized severance packages for employees Eric intended to cut once he secured control. At 10:55 a.m. Saturday, we walked to the conference room. We passed room 408 on the way, Eric and Kelsey's room. Ryan paused, just for a moment. From inside, Eric's voice, faint. Then Kelsey's laugh. Ryan didn't knock. He just stood there, jaw clenched. She once promised she'd never lie to me. I nodded. They both lied to us. But today, they answer for it. We walked on. At exactly 11 a.m., I stood at the head of the conference table. Behind me, the screen lit up. Board members were seated. Legal counsel to my right. Ryan, silent and strong, to my left. I began. Thank you for being here. Today's agenda is short. We are addressing severe ethical violations, financial misconduct, and an attempted hostile restructuring inside Donovan Technologies. The room fell quiet. Then, right on cue, the door opened. Eric strolled in, adjusting his collar. Kelsey behind him, face flushed the moment she saw Ryan seated at the end of the table. Eric's smile faltered. What's going on? There's no system breach, I replied. This is an emergency meeting authorized per protocol. He blinked. Emergency? I pressed the remote. The screen changed. Eric and Kelsey. Hand in hand. At check-in. In the elevator. Dining. Smiling. Receipts flashed next. Hotel stays. Dinner bills. Room upgrades. Filed under client acquisition. Filed using the company card. For people who didn't exist. Silence took over. And then I spoke again. We co-founded this company. But trust doesn't come with a title. It must be earned. Eric opened his mouth. I cut him off. And you lost it, Eric. Every bit of it. Eric froze mid-sentence, his hand half raised as if to gesture toward the screen. But he wasn't quick enough to spin the lie this time. Not here. Not in this room where power sat measured in silence, in signatures, in votes. He began, his voice more breath than words. Don't, I said flatly, pressing the remote again. Another slide appeared. A high-resolution photo of a Tiffany & Company ring, complete with a receipt labeled VIP client engagement gift. Date stamped 2 weeks ago. Next to it, a time-coded video. Kelsey in our company hallway, fidgeting with her gloves. Pulling them on each time she passed someone. Like she didn't want anyone to see what was on her hand. This isn't about who you date, I said, keeping my voice level. This is about misusing company funds, falsifying records, and initiating a hostile shift in ownership without board approval. I turned to face the members seated around the long walnut table. Eric Donovan submitted proposals to restructure shares, with the clear intent of lowering my equity stake below veto threshold. He also drafted paperwork to install a new executive role. Ryan stood. His voice, though calm, carried weight. The nominee for that role was Kelsey Monroe. A ripple moved through the room like a quiet storm. Eyes darted, murmurs began. Kelsey turned to Eric with wide, pleading eyes. He didn't look at her. I accessed Eric's encrypted folder under my assigned security clearance, Ryan continued. What I found were documents prepared without protocol, severance packages, bonus disbursements, and funds pre-authorized for departure settlements. Joan Whitaker, our longest-standing board member and in-house legal counsel, opened her tablet. I've reviewed the submitted evidence, she said, tapping the screen. There's a clear pattern of abuse of executive privileges, intentional obstruction of audits, and willful misrepresentation of company resources. Eric tried to scoff. This is ridiculous. It's a personal vendetta. Grace is just jealous? I said quietly, cutting him off again. You want to call this jealousy? You forged fake clients, charged company cards for private weekends, used our brand's name to bankroll your affair, and secretly hired attorneys to file divorce paperwork behind my back while still calling me your wife. Eric's mouth snapped shut. I stepped forward and dropped a printed email on the table. Your request to disperse early bonus funds under the name Transition Capital. His signature was printed at the bottom. No one moved. No one spoke. Finally, Joan lifted her hand. I move that the board vote to revoke Eric Donovan's executive authority effective immediately and suspend his CEO role pending a full financial investigation. One by one, hands rose. Unanimous. Eric's face went pale. The kind of pale that sinks past the skin and into the bones. He looked around the room, searching for someone to side with him. Someone to offer a rescue line. But no one did. Not even Kelsey. She sat frozen, shrinking into her chair, the gleam of confidence completely stripped away. Per company policy, Joan continued, executive control now shifts to the remaining co-founder, Audrey Donovan, until a formal vote to appoint a permanent CEO. I didn't react outwardly. I didn't need to. Because this moment wasn't about vengeance. It was about truth finally taking its seat at the table. Security arrived moments later. Eric stood stiffly, his shoulders rigid. You think this ends here? He spat at me. No, I said. It ends in court. It ends with full restitution. It ends when everything stolen, from this company, from me, from your own integrity, is accounted for. You're ungrateful, he hissed. We built this together. I carried you when you had nothing. And I never betrayed you, I said. Even when I had every reason to. His fists clenched, but the guard stepped in. Sir, please collect your belongings. All company access will be revoked within the hour. Eric turned to Kelsey, but she didn't look at him. She looked at Ryan, who still hadn't said a word to her. That silence said more than 1,000 accusations ever could. As Eric was escorted out, Kelsey finally found her voice. Ryan. I didn't know it would go this far. He didn't respond. So I did. Kelsey Monroe, your contract is officially terminated. HR will deliver your severance details this afternoon. And if you're still wondering what went wrong, maybe start by not helping someone commit fraud while wearing your engagement ring from someone else. Her face crumbled. But I didn't stay to watch it. Because I wasn't there for drama. I was there to clean house. The boardroom slowly emptied. I stood at the head of the table, overlooking the ocean through glass windows still streaked with early sunlight. On the table, next to the untouched glass of water, was a folder labeled Proposed Organizational Restructure. The same folder Eric once thought would be my undoing. Instead, it became his own execution letter. By the time the doors closed behind the last board member, I stood alone in the conference room. The silence was not empty, it was victorious. Not loud or triumphant, but steady, like the still air after a passing storm. I reached for the glass of water I hadn't touched during the meeting. My hand trembled for the first time all day. I didn't drink it. Instead, I turned and walked out. I returned to my suite and immediately dialed my private attorney. He had been on retainer for years, mostly for company compliance matters, never personal. Until now. I'm ready to file, I said. There was a pause. Then, divorce? No negotiation. No reconciliation. I want it clean and final. He cleared his throat. Any conditions for division of assets? I don't want anything from the past, I said, my voice level. Let him keep what he's already drained. All I want is control of my name, my share, and my future. I'll draft the papers tonight. I ended the call and sat still on the edge of the bed, the evening light stretching across the room in long, golden streaks. My phone buzzed again. This time, a message from our PR director, sent to both Eric and me for approval. Draft: Eric Donovan has stepped down from his role as CEO for personal reasons. Grace Donovan will assume interim leadership responsibilities. I deleted the word personal. Rewrote it myself. Eric Donovan has been removed from the CEO position following a special board session due to confirmed ethical violations and financial misconduct. I didn't want to spare his image. Not anymore. The truth, however bitter, deserved to be named. I clicked send. That night, I packed up my temporary office at the resort. Before I left, I paused by the hotel plaque near the conference wing. The brass plate read, Board Executive Suite. It used to make me feel intimidated. Now, it felt small. 1 week later, the announcement went public. Press coverage came swiftly. Headlines were clinical, but pointed. Power couple collapses after CEO's secret scandal. Donovan Technologies under new leadership. Scandal sparks shift in Silicon Valley boardroom. But I didn't flinch. I had nothing to hide. The first investor call under my new title as acting CEO was packed. I didn't open with optimism. I opened with facts. I told them what had happened. I showed them how we were fixing it. I spoke like someone who'd lived through the fire and was still standing in the ash. I ended the call with one promise: we don't rebuild trust with slogans. We do it with proof. You'll have it. 3 months later, they did. Revenue rebounded. Clients who had pulled out during the chaos returned. And perhaps the most ironic twist? The Reynolds Group, the very ones Eric had claimed to be meeting during his business trip, signed the biggest contract in our company's history under my leadership. And yet, my greatest victory wasn't a deal or a number. It was Mentora. A mentorship initiative I quietly launched after the fallout. A program for women in tech. Not performative. Not designed for PR, real conversations, real coaching, real elevation. I hosted the first roundtable myself. We met in a sunlit glass atrium inside our San Jose headquarters. 10 young women, interns, engineers, recent hires, all staring at me like I was something between a war survivor and a CEO. I'm not here because I figured it all out, I told them honestly. I'm here because I finally stopped waiting for someone else to tell me I deserved this seat. They didn't take notes. They just listened. And I think that's what they needed. Not tips or formulas. Just permission to claim space. Later that evening, Ryan stopped by my office. He leaned against the doorframe with a quiet look I had come to know well. "You did it," he said. "We did," I corrected. "You gave me more than access. You gave me clarity." We didn't talk about Kelsey anymore. Not because we avoided it, but because it no longer defined either of us. Our conversations shifted over time, from post-mortems of the past to quiet reflections of the future. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. But it was solid. We had both been betrayed. We had both walked through the fire. And now, we were building something new, whatever it was, brick by brick, without pressure. One morning, just after my 42nd birthday, I reserved a table at my favorite restaurant. Alone. No entourage. No press. The waiter asked, "Will someone be joining you, Miss Donovan?" I smiled. "Not tonight." I ordered red wine, Oregon Pinot, same as before. But this time, it tasted different. Not like nostalgia. Not like regret. Just like closure. I reached into my purse and pulled out an envelope I'd sealed 10 years ago. A letter I had written to myself at 32, when the marriage had already started to crack, but I was still clinging to hope like a religion. I unfolded the paper. "If someday you feel left behind, remember you never started this journey for anyone else. And you don't need a hand to keep walking." I reread it twice. Then folded it again and slipped it back into my purse. Then I raised my glass, not to the past. To the woman I had become. To the life I had reclaimed. 1 week after my quiet birthday dinner, an email arrived in my personal inbox with the subject line, "Women Rewriting Power Forum, Keynote Request." It was from a non-profit in Palo Alto that supported female executives across industries. They were hosting their annual forum, and they wanted me to deliver the keynote speech. The topic? Rebuilding after betrayal. I stared at the screen for a long time. My first instinct was to decline. I wasn't a motivational speaker. I wasn't polished like some TED Talk regular. And I didn't want pity or applause. But then I thought of the women in Mentora. I thought of the interns who watched me reclaim a company I co-founded, who whispered thank yous when no one else heard. Maybe it wasn't about telling my story. Maybe it was about giving someone else permission to start their own. I accepted. The day of the event, I arrived early, long before the lights came on or the auditorium filled. The event coordinator greeted me with a clipboard and a warm smile. She led me onto the stage for a mic check. The house was empty, the chairs still lined in perfect rows, waiting. The podium stood center stage, a single spotlight casting my silhouette onto the wood floor behind me. I looked at it. Not fragile. Not hardened. Just whole. At 6 p.m., the seats were full. Rows of women, some corporate titans, others just beginning. Some with notebooks open, others holding coffee cups like armor. I stepped up to the microphone. "I used to think betrayal was what broke people," I began, my voice calm, grounded. "But now I know, it's not the betrayal. It's how we choose to face it." Silence. But not uncomfortable. Intent. I'm not here to inspire you with some miracle comeback story. I didn't rise from the ashes. I didn't find happiness overnight. I just didn't stop. I kept walking. Even when it hurt. Even when I wanted to disappear. I walked. I paused. Looked across the crowd. And sometimes, that's the bravest thing you can do. Not roar. Not fight. Just stay on your feet. I didn't talk about Eric by name. But I did talk about being lied to. Undermined. Replaced. About finding out the man I built a life and company with had already drafted my erasure before he even packed his suitcase. I told them what I did with that betrayal. How I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I strategized. I planned. And I took back what was mine piece by piece, with evidence, integrity, and silence sharper than any scream. At the end, I said, you weren't wrong for trusting. But you get to choose when to stop. Applause erupted. It wasn't loud for the sake of volume. It was steady, heavy, emotional. Women rose to their feet, some with tears in their eyes, others clapping with both relief and rage. Backstage, a woman in her 50s approached me. Simple cardigan. No makeup. Just raw, honest energy. I stayed in a marriage for 19 years longer than I should have, she whispered. Because I thought leaving meant I failed. You reminded me that holding on isn't the same as loyalty. Thank you. I took her hand and squeezed it. Wanting to hold on is human. But knowing when to let go. That's freedom. I returned to my apartment that night, the same place where I once curled up on the floor, broken by the quiet knowledge that Eric didn't choose me anymore. Now, the space didn't feel heavy. Just mine. On my desk sat a small box, wrapped in ash-gray paper with no card. I opened it. Inside was a miniature carved wooden office chair. Etched on its back, lead with dignity. I smiled. I knew who it was from. Ryan never said much. He didn't need to. We still weren't anything people could label. Not officially dating. Not pretending to be something we weren't. But we met for coffee every Wednesday. We walked together on Sunday evenings by the lake. We talked without tiptoeing. No fixing. Just presence. One evening, someone asked me outright, "Are you two dating?" I answered honestly. No need to name it. We just let it breathe. And that was enough. Because after everything I had lost, the one thing I had finally learned to protect was peace. I didn't chase drama. I didn't chase closure. I chased clarity, and I found it. Later that month, Mentora was recognized at a national innovation forum for its impact on diversity in tech leadership. I stood on the stage with a few men beside me, young women with steady eyes and strong voices. I didn't give a long speech. Just one sentence. We don't want privilege, we want space to grow the right way. They cheered. But the cheer wasn't for me. It was for themselves. They saw what was possible. Because someone finally showed them that betrayal doesn't break you, it wakes you up. It was a Thursday morning when the final piece of my past tried to crawl its way back in. I was reviewing end-of-quarter strategy briefs when Rachel, my HR director, buzzed into my office. Her voice was unusually tight. "Eric Donovan just called," she said. "He's asking for a meeting. Claims it's about legacy clarification regarding his contributions to the company. Wants to talk to you directly." I didn't respond right away. I sat back in my chair, watching the morning haze roll over downtown San Jose from my 31st floor window. Legacy. That word used to mean something when we said it together, back when we were building code out of hope and storing servers in our garage. But now, it sounded hollow. Desperate. "Tell him to put it in writing," I finally said. "If he has legal matters to address, he can contact my attorney." Rachel hesitated. "You sure?" "He sounded like he's not doing well." I turned away from the window. Neither was I when he lied to me. Let's not forget who created this mess. And I meant it. It had taken nearly a year to cleanse the company's books, rebuild partner confidence, and stabilize morale. But the real work wasn't corporate, it was internal. Quiet. Slow. Each morning I woke up, I asked myself the same thing: do I feel like I belong in my own story today? More and more, the answer was yes. That weekend, I attended a leadership panel hosted by Stanford. I wasn't a featured guest, just there to observe and support some of our new hires who were presenting. During a break, I stepped outside for air and found Ryan already leaning against a column, sipping coffee from a paper cup. He glanced at me and smiled. Thought I'd see you here. I smiled back. Couldn't miss the show. Our team is growing fast. Your team, he corrected gently. You rebuilt it. I nodded, eyes drifting over the campus gardens. Sometimes I still wake up thinking I'm inside a nightmare. Like the hotel, the boardroom, none of it happened. But it did, he said. And you didn't just survive it. You rewrote the ending. There was a pause. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something small, a folded piece of paper. He handed it to me. I wasn't sure if I should give this to you. I wrote it after everything exploded. I unfolded it. Just one line, handwritten in tight block letters. Thank you for giving me a reason to still believe. I looked up, but he wasn't watching me. He was looking out toward the students, the world ahead of them. It wasn't just Kelsey, he said softly. It was everything. My career, my judgment, my ability to trust. You helped me reset that compass. I put the paper in my bag. We helped each other. We didn't say more. We didn't need to. Some connections aren't loud. They're simply steady. The next week, I returned to HQ and found a small envelope waiting on my desk. No name. Just a stamp from Phoenix, Arizona. I opened it. Inside, a letter from Eric. Scrawled. Unstructured. Filled with hollow apologies. He spoke of being lost, of getting caught up in ambition, of how maybe we weren't meant to survive the success we built. He ended with, I know I can't undo the damage, but I want you to know I regret what I did. Not because I lost power. But because I lost you. I folded the letter and slid it into the shredder. Not because I hated him. But because closure doesn't come in the form of a man who only wakes up once everything is gone. Closure comes the moment you realize you no longer need it. That night, I stood by my kitchen window, holding a cup of tea, watching the streetlights flicker on below. The city felt alive. Full of stories. And for the first time in over a decade, I wasn't buried beneath someone else's shadow. I was writing mine. The next day, Mentora announced a partnership with 3 leading tech firms to expand their mentorship program nationally. We would be in 20 cities by next year. With funding. With teams. With reach. And every girl who once sat silent in a room full of men would now have a hand waiting to guide her forward. I met with our advisory board that afternoon. When they asked if I had any closing words, I kept it short. Success without integrity is just theft in a nicer suit. We're not building companies anymore. We're building cultures. They applauded. But again, not for me. For the possibility of a world we hadn't dared imagine before. Exactly 1 year to the day after that infamous board meeting, I walked alone through the marble lobby of Donovan Technologies, now rebranded simply as Donovan. No first names. No co-founders. Just the legacy, clean and focused. The old company logo was gone. In its place, a sleek new emblem cast in brushed steel, 3 ascending arcs, one for resilience, one for reinvention, and one for rebirth. Not a single one represented Eric. I paused at the entrance to the executive wing. The hallway was quiet, polished, brighter than I remembered. On the wall was a portrait frame that used to hold a photo of Eric and me, back when the press called us the power couple of Silicon Valley. That frame now held an abstract sketch of a bridge. The symbolism wasn't subtle. The receptionist smiled as I passed. The team's ready for the leadership roundtable. I nodded, grateful. Before joining the others, I stopped by the break room. It was filled with chatter, new hires, young interns, diverse, sharp, hungry. They looked at me not as someone who co-built the company, but as someone who saved it. I sipped my coffee slowly, thinking of how much I had once sacrificed to make room for someone else's ego. How long I had smiled politely while being quietly erased. How often I had convinced myself that holding on was the same as being strong. But now? Now I knew better. Later that evening, I attended a small celebration hosted by the Mentora team to commemorate our first anniversary. The venue was modest, a renovated warehouse now turned innovation hub. Inside, it pulsed with warmth and energy. There were photos on the wall, women presenting, mentoring, leading. A timeline of growth. A wall of gratitude. As I walked past the display, one card caught my eye. Written in a bold, blue marker. We don't want power handed to us. We just want to stop apologizing for taking it. Beneath it, signed, Intern Class, Spring 2025. I felt tears press against my throat. Not from sadness. From truth. I had spent years trying to be palatable. Controlled. Respectable. The kind of woman who made herself smaller so no one else would feel threatened. And look where that got me. Humiliated. Lied to. Replaced. Until I stopped shrinking and remembered who I was. Grace Donovan wasn't a victim of betrayal. She was a woman who turned it into fuel. Later that night, as the guests thinned out and the lights dimmed, I stepped onto the rooftop patio for some air. The city stretched wide beneath the stars, humming with late-night life. And then, soft footsteps behind me. I turned. Ryan. No fanfare. Just him, holding a cup of coffee in one hand and a folded document in the other. You left before I could give this to you, he said, offering the paper. I opened it. It was a finalized proposal, Donovan X Maddox Initiative, a new cross-discipline program for ethical leadership in tech. Designed to train not just the best engineers, but the right ones. I want to co-launch it with you, he said, his voice steady. Not as a favor. As a believer. I looked at him for a long moment. You really think we're ready to build something new? His answer was soft. We already are. We stood there for a while, watching the horizon, letting the silence breathe. He didn't reach for my hand. I didn't lean into him. But we were close. In that quiet, honest kind of way. Back at home, I finally boxed up the last remnants of my marriage. Old notebooks. Framed magazine covers. Eric's archived awards. I didn't burn them. I didn't tear them. I just let them go. Into a sealed box, into storage. Not as a grave. As a reminder. A reminder that even the brightest beginnings can end in shadows, but it doesn't mean you disappear with them. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise and took a walk along the lake. The path was empty, still wet from dawn dew. I paused halfway through and sat on a bench. From my bag, I pulled a small notebook, the one I used to carry when we were first building the company. Back when I thought loyalty meant silence. That notebook had always been filled with our goals. I opened to the last page and wrote something new. I didn't lose everything. I just stopped protecting what was never mine. I closed it. Exhaled. And smiled. Because revenge wasn't watching Eric fall. It wasn't humiliating Kelsey. It wasn't even taking back the company. Revenge was waking up every morning and no longer having to explain myself to anyone. Revenge was peace. Revenge was freedom. Revenge was me. Grace's journey wasn't just about betrayal, it was about rebirth. She didn't scream. She didn't fight dirty. She simply used the truth, her power, and her silence. In a world that expects women to endure quietly, she rewrote the script. If you found strength in her story, don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Echoes. Share your thoughts in the comments, and remember, the deepest revenge is living well and never needing to bow.